Welcome to the Eating at a Meeting podcast. I'm your host, Tracy Stuckrath, dietary needs expert, certified meetings manager, certified food protection manager. I have searched the globe to find people and businesses who are creating safe, sustainable, and inclusive food and beverage experiences for their employees, guests, and communities. In each episode, you will find authentic conversations about how food and beverage impacts inclusion, sustainability, culture, community, health, and wellness. I know that sounds like a lot, but we're going to cover it all. Are you ready to feed engagement, nourish inclusion, and bolster your bottom line? If so, let's go. In this episode today, we're going to talk about the love of food as a traditional food and how we utilize that in making foods with our guest today. And so I'm so excited to chat with her. Her name is Pilar Eguez Guevara. She is an Ecuadorian anthropologist, a writer and filmmaker based in Kansas. She has co-founded and directed Comidas de Quran, an independent food education and media company that blends ethnographic, I can't pronounce words, and film to document and teach about food traditions and transformations in Ecuador and Latin America. Hello, Pilar.
Hi. It's Comidas que curan. Yeah. So the translation is foods that heal.
Foods that heal.
Foods that heal in English. Yeah. And thank you for inviting me. Yeah, I'm excited.
Oh, you're welcome. Well, I'm excited to talk to you too, especially since I watched your documentary. And I loved the fact, and people are going to wonder, coconut heals. I mean, that was the theme throughout the entire, it's a main product and a main food source for the Ecuadorians. And I thought it was really interesting that the doctor that was on there, the statistics of low cardiovascular disease with so much coconut.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, those statistics are not from studies based in Ecuador, but are studies that like historical, like in the 70s in Sri Lanka and other parts of the world, especially Southeast Asia. We have some information about people that used to eat a lot of, they have coconut as a big part of their diet, mm-hmm. and they're actually very healthy, and they don't have any issues with cardiovascular health, heart problems, and the kind of things that we, from the Western medical standpoint, attribute to saturated fats. And coconut is a big source of saturated fats. So understanding the way that people use this food traditionally, and mm-hmm. also looking into their histories, their personal histories and their memories, which is what I did to make this documentary. I talked to older people and I asked them how they used to eat when they were children and how their grandmothers and grandparents used to cook, and understanding this and how it evolved, how their diet has evolved, it really help us see what are the sources of the problems in the food, have been the changes that have led us to be so sick today, as opposed to people in the old days, 60 or 70 years ago, when the grandparents of these people I interviewed, maybe even longer, lived, and they didn't experience this kind of problems. So
right. So So tell us about foods that heal. And then I just by you saying that, I remember the gentleman standing next to the street, and he's like, or in the field, and he's like, yeah, you take this and it'll heal your liver. And if you eat this, it'll heal your kidneys. And it was just mind blowing. It was really interesting.
Yeah. Well, I included this interview with one of the main characters of the film, which is the part you are talking about. His name is Julio, and he's a maker of traditional coconut oil. The way that he renders the oil is in an artisan way, is artisanal. And I was just mind blown when I interviewed him, because he knows so much about plants. And that's how a lot of older people are in Ecuador, including my grandmother and my mom. And even myself, like I recognize it in myself because I was raised by my aunt and my mom and my grandmother, and they know a lot. They have a lot of knowledge about how to use plants medicinally. So that's the connection I wanted to make in the film, that the same people that know how to make traditional foods into healthy and delicious foods, these same people know how to use plants and how to use them to heal us, and how they know the properties of the plants. They know what they're good for and when they should be avoided. So they have this huge amount of knowledge that has been, passed from generation to generation. So it's an empirical knowledge. It's been tested. So the moms that I interviewed, the grandmothers that I interviewed, they raised many kids, many children. They actually know how to prevent a child from dying, a newborn child from dying. They know what to feed this child in order for this child to thrive. So I have a lot of respect for them, and this is what I wanted to convey in the film.
Well, and it goes back and it jumps me to the very, very end as well, with the woman who is the medical practitioner talking about it was paternal medicine, right? Is that right? Like she even said, we need to look at the traditional medicine that we utilized and combine it with the paternal medicine, or paternal medicine needs to listen to some of that too, because we need to blend that to treat people, because you can't do it with drugs alone. Yeah.
Yeah. The term she uses is paternalistic. So
yes.
What she means is that when, paternalistic medicine is the medicine that does not recognize any knowledge or any value in the local culture and in the people that they're serving. So they go to communities, be it indigenous communities or Afro-Ecuadorian communities throughout the country, and the usual practice used to be, what she's referring to, the paternalistic style, is to come in and say, this is what you should do, and this is what you should take, and this is the way that you should eat, that has nothing to do with your traditions. So and what happens is that, yes, Western medicine has some value, but there are other ways that the local people know. There's this traditional knowledge systems that where this medical knowledge and nutrition knowledge is contained, that people have used effectively to heal themselves. They might not be able to help someone with infection, like a severe infection, from dying, which is why we have penicillin, and penicillin is a big aid, and antibiotics. But at the same time, they know how to treat of so many different conditions, and there's just so much more to understand about plants and their their power of plants, and the effect that the different plants have medicinally. So this is what she's talking about. And the other important thing to understand there is that paternalistic medicine or paternalistic interventions, medical interventions or nutrition interventions, do not take into account the fact that if you don't have a culturally relevant intervention, if you don't understand what these people have been using and what they are used to and what they need and what they know, they already know, your intervention will fail, which is what happens most of the time, that treatments are so disconnected from the local knowledge and the habits of the people that they fail. You end up having a lot of people that I interview, they live very unhappy lives because the diets that they're told to use and integrate, they have nothing to do with the foods that are available locally, the foods that they were raised with and that have so much value, as opposed to that a lot of these Western doctors believe. They have erroneous beliefs, they have false beliefs, they have incorrect beliefs about what the foods do to the body. So And a lot of what, and this gets even more complex when, racial stereotypes being mixed in. When you stigmatize a group of people and you don't recognize that they have knowledge and they have valuable knowledge about how to heal themselves, how to feed themselves, and you think that better because you're a Western doctor or you went to medical school, then it becomes more complicated because people end up feeling inferior. They end up feeling bad about themselves, bad about their culture. They're ashamed of their food. And that's a point that I really try to speak up about, because it's not, I don't think it's discussed to the extent that we need to discuss this issue of shame around food and guilt around food, which is very prevalent.
Mm-hmm. I so agree. And then when we take some of that food that's not as nutritious and it's so much cheaper, we lose that value. It helps lose the value or take the value away from that traditional foods. And the chef that you had in the movie, he said, we have nationalism for sports, nationalism for politics, but we don't have it for our own life. And really, I think it was also saying for the traditional foods and for food, we don't have nationalism around food and what those historical things are. And I think one of the things other things that I thought was really important that he said is that when you go to the grocery store, you don't find those traditional foods. They're all everything's canned up and bottled up. And when you go to the market, the traditional foods are hard to do because you can't find the items in the market anymore, in the farmer's market. And that makes it hard.
Yeah. So that goes along with this whole idea of paternalistic interventions. And I think the food industry came from that place, from a place of industrialized food and packaged food and seed oils that were never in our diet, like refined seed oils and even wheat and refined wheat. They are better because they have a value attached to them, that they're better because they're modern. They're made with these modern technologies, and they're better, like, honestly, because they come from the US. I mean, the US is a big cultural influence in Latin America in many different areas and in food as well. Like, so in Ecuador, that's the big problem, that we value everything that comes from the US and from Europe. And we don't really see the value historically, that has been the case, that the value has been placed on these, industrialized and modern foods. And the Western medicine has validated those ideas. They had fed each other, Western medicine, telling us that seed oils are better for us and the refined oils that come in a bottle are more healthy than, the coconut oil or butter or lard. I mean, for ages now, for 40, 50 years, even longer, these traditional sources of fat have been demonized. And the industry has promoted that, and the Western doctors and the Western science has validated that. So what ends up happening is that we don't love ourselves because these foods are part of who we are. They're part of our identity. Right. So it really touches on what you said, that the nationalism is translated as do I love myself? Do I love my culture, my identity, or do I prefer what comes from abroad?
Or what I'm told to believe, right? Yeah, exactly. So what brought you to Foods That Heal? What inspired you to do that?
Yeah, so what inspired me is, again, this book called Nourishing Traditions, and it had a recipe of quinoa soup, which what quinoa is now, but maybe 20, 30 years ago, you wouldn't have known, but now it's superfood. And it was written in this book, the recipe, and it was the recipe book breaks down the value, all the nutrients and the techniques that traditionally are used, like slow cooking and using the bone broth to enhance the flavor and also the nutrition of the foods, and using traditional fats so that we can assimilate the fat-soluble vitamins. And I was blown away because at the time I was into foods and into diets, healthy diets, and it didn't occur to me to look into my own traditions and the knowledge from my own family. And I saw it represented in this book written in English, published in the US. And I had a aha moment, and I said, why am I looking elsewhere when I can actually talk to my mom and talk to my grandmother? And there's so many other grandmothers and grandparents and moms and aunts throughout the country that have this valuable knowledge that they used to raise me and the many generations, and that their grandmothers raised them with. And why am I not looking there? So this is where I started this project to really center the grandmothers, center the ancestors, center the women who have this knowledge. Yeah.
Right. Mm-hmm. Well, and because it's not, they don't necessarily have the means to put it in a cookbook and get it published elsewhere, but they can pass it down and teach kids. And kids love to learn how to cook, especially with grandmas, right? Mm-hmm. So I love the fact that you documented that. And there were so many people in the film that talked about the traditions of the food. And it reiterates, we take food for granted. Mm-hmm. And it reiterated watching them open up the coconut, which I've tried to do on my own, and I cannot do it, but taking the coconut and how they use the fat and the meat and the oil and use it in like every dish that they made, and the value of that. They took such pride in how they did that work.
Yeah, and it's interesting you say that, because that's how our students feel, and we teach students or younger people. The whole idea of our project is to reach the younger generations who are very interested in the modern foods, in the industrialized foods, in the modern trends, but not very interested in the traditional foods. They take them for granted because their mom makes it and it's not cool. It's not what the other kids bring to school. It's not what is sold in a package with shining,
characters,
and all the marketing that comes with it. It comes from your mom, and your mom is always there, and she makes it, and she knows how to make it. So what they say is exactly, we actually have cooking sessions with their moms and grandmothers and other grandmothers in the community, and they never occur. It didn't occur to them that this could be an educational experience. In one of our last workshops, one of our kids asked, we were in the cooking session. We had several sessions where we discussed, when we talked about concepts, we looked at films, and then we went to the main oven and the kitchen, which is an oven, and one of the kids asked, when are we having class again? And we said, this is the class. We didn't realize that was part of the class, that the part of the class was to actually have a session with with his grandmother or the grandmother of his neighbor, and actually experiencing the cooking. In a lot of cases, they see, and it's an everyday activity that they're used to. It's a routine. They see it on an everyday basis. Their mom and their grandmother are cooking in the oven, and they know how to do it. Maybe they help out, but it's not as when we come in and we tell them, this is valuable knowledge. And when on top of that, we give them a camera, and we teach them how to use the camera, and we say, tell a story about it and put it in a film. So these are some of the strategies that we're trying out to have the younger people get interested in the traditions of their culture, and also through research, just telling them, take a recipe and research it, understand where it came from, where does good food come from, when did your mom first learn how to make it, how long has this dish been around, and how has it changed? What is it? Are they using different ingredients now, and why? And talk to your mom. And this experience and this exercise of talking to their elders, it's very transformative.
That is so cool. Cause I never really like my dad's mom made this succotash. We have no idea how she made it. And we loved it and we can't replicate it, right? We don't know what she did. And so it's really painful not to know what that recipe is and how she did that. And growing up in Baltimore and making that traditional, and even crab cakes. How did grandma do those so well? And why do when my mom makes them, they fall apart? She gets mad about it all the time. How did grandma's not fall apart? But I think that's really amazing because it teaches you so much more about your history, because food has so much meaning when you think about the smells of it, as going to grandma's house. And that's,
I mean, it's an experience on so many different levels.
Right.
Like you're saying, it's a way to understand where you come from, why you like certain things and not others. You might have traumas around food and you don't understand why you like a particular food and another one you don't. And as an immigrant, that it becomes huge. It becomes huge. As an immigrant, this is when you start getting very interested in how to make your traditional foods because you miss them so much. But for people that live with their mom and their grand, we always try to highlight the aspect of the sensorial and the emotional, because food is just really a way to trigger emotions and a way to experience different sensations. And this is honestly one important reason why it's worth it to be alive, to be able to experience delicious food. And going back to what I was saying earlier, a lot of us, because of different kinds of beliefs, or we are being told to believe that certain foods, not necessarily traditional food, but any food, is unhealthy for us or make us fat, fear of fat, of getting fat, or fear that fat will make us fat, or sugar will make us fat. This whole pressure that comes from adhering to a certain body image, which affects women a lot. It deprives us from having a pleasurable experience and a peaceful and relaxing experience with food. And I think that is so important for our health. It's important for our mental health because it ensures that we are relaxed. When we are stressed, we cannot digest the food properly. So that's another big part of what the work we do and the approach we have to teaching about food is to really understand where you are when you have a plate of food in front of us. How do you connect with that food? And are you able to overcome your own prejudices about food, and maybe prejudices that others have instilled in you and you don't realize? So really developing that awareness, emotional awareness, able to makes you able to connect and experience one of the most pleasurable experiences that there is, which is eating food.
Yeah. Well, and I posted on Monday, I'm like, food, there's so many ways to show love with food, right? When somebody passes away or somebody is new to the neighborhood, or just feeding someone, right? I mean, there's so many ways that food is used for that. And we kind of take that for granted across the board.
Yeah, one thing I love to teach about is this lesson I learned from interviewing so many women, older women, especially expert cooks. And I asked them, how do you make the food so delicious? What's your secret? And they say, well, the secret is to make it with love, cook with love. And so at the beginning, I took it for granted. I said, well, that's what grandmothers and mothers say. That doesn't really mean anything or translated. It's translated into the food itself. But then I started, thinking more about it and researching a little more. And I came to understand the love that women put in the meal as a kind of placebo effect. Because as we were saying earlier, the way that you connect to the person that cooked the meal is really important. And when my mom cooks food for me, she really thinks of what I like and how I like it. And she puts all of her attention on it. And she constantly teaches me things like this. Like, for example, the other day she was saying, this is the care that you need to put on your pot when you're cooking. And she was talking about caring for the pot as if she was caring for a baby. You really need to watch your pot when you're cooking, because if you don't watch it and you go and do something else, which is what I normally do, like I always have so many other things I want to do at the same time as I cook. And she says, no, you have to stand next to the kitchen and watch your pot and really pay attention to it and care for it and, steer it and make sure, test it. And this is just revolutionary for me, because it's translating, like it really is like a mind-blowing, and it really touches on, because at first I don't do it. I always try to do something else, but she's really talking about caring for the food as putting all the love into the food. And this is going to translate into a delicious meal, one that is not burnt, one that has the right amount of salt, and one that is made with love. And I'm going to really understand and take that love in when I sit down and eat. Because I think one of the biggest taken for granted experiences in eating is that we sit down to eat and we trust that the person who made this meal is not going to poison us. That the person that made this food is going to give us something that is safe to eat. And it is going to be healthy for us. And this is when the trust comes in and the love comes in that you were talking about. So I think it's just talking to your folks and your people and your ancestors and anybody that is older and that has experience caring for people and nourishing people through food can teach us a lot about the meanings of food beyond the food itself.
And I'm posting a comment to my friend Bob, because we were having a conversation earlier today. So I'm like, Bob, come back and listen to Pilar at about minute 29, because what she says. But Nina posted in here, hello, but she said, talking with the elders about food is very powerful. I did an oral history research project focused on Puerto Rican culinary traditions. It was eye-opening to see how food and cooking connected women to their traditions and homeland. And I so agree with that. And then next week, my guest next week is kind of similar in that same context. So it's really going to be interesting of what he's done with people that have come into Canada, right? And bringing their traditions. And then Ashok, I hope I said that right, said, yes, his food is not only a fuel, it's an experience. And Ashok, I want to add on to that. Listen, watching Pilar's documentary too, it's somebody's livelihood, whether you're the cook or you're the farmer or you're the grocery store worker, right? Or the grandmother, whatever it is. I'm like, food has so many different meanings and experiences for each of us. And just going back to that movie, your movie, Pilar, Omar, is that right? He asked you, how much do you think they pay me for my coconuts? Right. And you said 50 cents. And he just laughed at you.
Yeah.
And he's like, yeah, no, I get 28 cents, 30 cents, 35 cents per coconut. And then you tie that back to the end of the movie or to the film as well. And he's saying that these food companies are not tying it back to the source, right? And thinking about where it comes from and the tradition. So it makes you think a lot different about food.
Yeah, I think what you're saying connects with what we are talking about here, about like the work of caring for your pot, caring for the food, caring for the people through the food, and caring for your plants. I mean, the people the farmers, talking to the farmers and understanding how much love, how much care they need to, and how much work. It's really hard work to really be able to grow the food that we eat. And that was part of the purpose of these interviews that included there, is to understand that it's really not whatever you think of a fair price. It's probably not fair, because it does not really recognize all of the work that goes into producing the food and caring for the land and for the plants. I have learned a lot recently about caring for plants from my friends at the Seed Savers Network. And the way they talk about seeds, I mean, one thing is to grow foods with the conventional methods, and another way is to do what they do, which is to really care about the seed that they use. So they use ancestral seeds, which go back to what we were discussing earlier about, or at the beginning of the film, about the diversity. Why are we not the reason why many people are not cooking traditional foods is because the product is not available, because we are not growing that. So my friends at the Seed Savers Network, this is their mission, is to really save and rescue those seeds from foods that are discontinued and that are forgotten and that are lost and that are not grown anymore. So that really takes a lot of care and effort, and the consequences or the results are huge in terms of the health of the soil, in terms of the diversity that we are losing when we lose those seeds. We lose the immense diversity of vegetables and fruits and all the microorganisms that also thrive in those diverse kind of gardens also benefit us.
Well, and we were talking before we got online about the soil and the monocrops. And when you only grow one type of food it diminishes the nutritional value. It's like why we need to do the color, the rainbow of food in our bodies, right? Mm-hmm. We need to do the rainbow of foods in our soil too.
Yeah, I mean, it is really connected. You know, some people, I have talked with my friends at the Seed Savers Network, and we discussed this issue of the disconnect between the land and the fields where, you know, the food is grown and our health. And we mistakenly think that we can regain health or get healthier by, you know, eating this or that food or changing our diet or maybe taking in some probiotics. But I think they're very much interconnected. So the further we are from the country and from the place where we grow our food, and the least likely we are to get the benefits from these, you know, especially the microorganisms. I think that's been a big part of my research and my interest, is to really look at these microorganisms and the diversity that we can get from growing crops using the methods of permaculture that are the same methods that our ancestors used to grow our food. So what this means is that not only the crops are going to be healthier, the soil is going to be healthier, the foods are going to be more nutritious, but also we are going to have a bigger diversity of microorganisms, which is what directly feeds on our immune system. So when we look at our current situation with pandemic lasting for several years, is that really a sign of how disconnected we are from the land, because we are not benefiting from this world of microorganisms that are supporting our immune system, which is why we are weak and we are getting sick. Yeah.
Well, and it reminds me of a study that came out, and I have to look it back up again, but it said people with food allergies, the further you get out into nature and into the farming land, there were fewer allergies than in suburban situations, because you're out there with the microorganisms that our bodies really thrive on, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So I think that's part of what, going back to what you were saying about connection to the land, and the comment that somebody made on the chat, is this is one additional reason why, you know, connecting with traditional foods is important. Is not only a connection with what's grown locally, it's a way to connect with what's grown locally, what's part of your landscape and the soil that you're standing on. And the closer you are to there, the closer you are also to your own roots, to your own origins. And that, interestingly enough, connects to your immune system and your ability to survive. So, yeah.
And we definitely don't. We're like you. We put something on the pot and we walk away. We're not thinking about that. So your mother's smart.
Yeah, it all at the end of the day, it all connects. I think it's all related, and it also has. I think it has a very important emotional component to it again. And for me, that's also has to do with our health. I mean, the more stressed we are, the more unhealthy we're going to be. I mean, stress really puts our immune system in a weak state. We live in a state of alert, and we are constantly going to be feeling unhealthy if we are not feeling relaxed. And again, going back to what I was saying, not only connecting with nature, being close to nature, but also taking a moment to feel relaxed the moment we eat. So really reflecting upon what is our relationship with this meal that we have in front of us, no matter what it is. I go to someone's house, and maybe it's not in my habit to eat a particular food, but I'm offered this food. And of course, I'm not talking about allergies. I know that
Right.
you're advocate for understanding people's needs specifically for their allergic reactions. But I'm saying, if you don't have an allergy and you're offered food at somebody's place, you can choose to relax and have a pleasurable meal with the other person, which is another thing that I really like to emphasize, is that food is much more than the plate. It's also the person that offered us the food. It's also the person that is sitting in front of us. And this is something that I learned from the mothers and the grandmothers that I interviewed. They complain that the younger generations don't sit at the dinner table. There is no dinner time. There's no overtime. I don't know what this a term in English would be, but in my language, in Spanish, there is a specific term to talk about the time after the meal, when you sit and share with the other person. For many people, this is unheard of. A lot of people might not have ever done this, but in our culture, it's so prevalent. This is the best part of the meal is the after meal, the conversation that follows the meal. And if you look at the literature, I mean, there's studies coming out right now about help us understand obesity, especially amongst children, and how family meals play a role. There's a family time and a dinner time where you share with your family members or with other people, or where you eat by yourself. It's really mind-blowing when you think about how much that plays into your ability to assimilate that food and to benefit from that food. I have taught some workshops with people, and we do an exercise. Homework is to have different kinds of experiences: eating alone, eating with a stranger, eating with someone you love, and also eating with an enemy. Because a lot of my work is connecting conflict, transformation, and food. And so this is an exercise I have tried with my workshop. A lot of some of the students that I have had, they have told me stories about how they are unable to eat alone. So one of my students told a story when she went to China. She's from Ecuador, and she went to China, and for the first time she had to eat a meal by herself, and she couldn't.
Really?
She couldn't put food in her mouth because she wasn't used to eating alone. So she had to call her family and schedule a time in the middle of friends. Friends would support her in this, because she would just completely freeze, she couldn't put food in her mouth because she wasn't used to eating alone. So this really shows how eating is such it takes much of the psychosocial environment. It really depends on the psychosocial and cultural context in order to actually happen. To eat. So all of those things have to do with what we're talking about, like health, physical health, how it translates into our health, and how we can look beyond the nutrients and the substance to understand really how our minds and our bodies and our digestive system work together. And that's actually supported in the science. Our gut is connected to our brain and our heart, and they don't work separately. So
and my friend LA just posted, interesting as I sit down to eat lunch alone.
Yeah. It's very interesting. Yeah, it's very interesting to think about it, because normally we don't talk about these things when we talk about nutrition or food or diets. But
and chefs don't they don't really learn about the nutrition of it. Nutritionists don't really learn about cooking. And it's also like psychologists or sociologists who need to do that.
Yeah, I think we can learn a lot about psychologists, nutrition, and food culture side. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, we are at the 45-minute mark. Pilar, I think I'm going to have you back on because there are so many things we didn't even talk about.
Yes.
So 2 final questions. What's your next project that you're working on? Are you working on another film or another research project?
Yeah, so I'm very happy to announce that we will be premiering 3 new short films, which we were born out of visual arts and food ethnography program we carried out at a rural town in the coast of Ecuador with children, youth, and older women. And so we went there back in October, and we held workshops on how to make films and how to do research about your own food traditions. So we picked 3 recipes, and we had the older women the recipes, and we made 3 documentaries out of that. So they're ready now, and we will be going back to the community where we shot the films, and we will do a screening there, but we will also screen them virtually. So I encourage everybody to sign up to our newsletter, comidasquecuran.org, and or follow us on our social media. I try to post in English and Spanish. Sometimes I would do posts only in Spanish, sometimes in English, but I make sure everybody knows about the interesting events in both languages because I have audiences in Spanish and so yeah, I encourage everybody to sign up to our newsletter, comidasquecuran.org, and you will be sure to get a link to the streaming. And I also, on our website, you can find our previous films that we have made. Raspando Coco is also available for streaming online and for institutions. It has had a really great reception by institutions like colleges and universities. Right now, it's at about 15 different college and university libraries who are using it to teach their students about food and food culture, and even about
amazing
race and ethnicity. And so it's really great, and you can find information on our website. Same. Yeah. So moving forward, we look forward to continue doing these projects. There will be many more surprises. We are planning many programs for this year, so I'll be happy to share that with anybody interested.
Awesome. Well, I just copied all of the links to find you on the Facebook on the comments. So everybody should hopefully be able to find you. And
awesome.
And I'm so excited to listen to everything that you come out with because it's really interesting. One final question that I always like to ask everybody is, what is your favorite food and drink?
Yes, my favorite food, I mean, it changes with time, but recently I've been feeling really nostalgic because I'm from Ecuador and I live in Kansas right now. So one of my favorite foods to eat in winter in Kansas is sweet plantains cooked with butter and cinnamon. It's a special kind of dish that my grandmother used to make, and I feel it's like a comfort food for me, and it's really easy to make. So it's made in many other parts of Latin America and I think other parts of the world. And my favorite drink is mamey shake or mamey smoothie. Mamey is a fruit that grows in tropical areas. It grows in some parts of Ecuador, but it's very popular in the Caribbean, in Caribbean countries like Puerto Rico and Cuba. My husband is from Cuba, so that's my favorite, all-time favorite fruit and fruit juice and smoothie. So you can make it as a smoothie without milk, or my favorite is with milk. You don't even need to add sugar because it's very sweet. So
awesome. I'll see if I can find some here in North Carolina.
Yeah, actually, it's really difficult. I have never seen it at the World Food stores because it's maybe you can find it frozen, but I have never seen it actually. You have to go to Miami to get some.
Nelisa Rodriguez just said, "Mammy is delicious." Yes. All right. We'll have to find out where you get it as well. So everybody, thank you for Pilar. First and foremost, thank you so much for being my guest today. And I'm so glad we connected via Facebook. So
yes,
thank you for the work that you're doing.
So much. Yeah, thank you also for the work you do. And
thank you.
Keeping up with all the great interviews you do to other guests.
Thank you. I appreciate that. So everybody, thank you for tuning in. We'll be back next week with Len from Toronto talking about food, bringing food cultures into Toronto area as well. So tune in next week. And until then, stay safe and eat well. Have a great day. Bye. And Pilar, stay on. I want to talk to you some more.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Eating at a Meeting podcast, where every meal matters. I'm Tracy Stuckrath, your food and beverage inclusion expert. Call me and let's get started right now on creating safe and inclusive food and beverage experiences for your customers, your employees, and your communities. Share the podcast with your friends and colleagues at our Eating at a Meeting Facebook page and on all podcast platforms. To learn more about me and receive valuable information, go to tracystuckrath.com. And if you'd like more information on how to feed engagement, nourish inclusion, and bolster your bottom line, then visit eatingatameeting.com.